that directly means that there's schools, it's taxpayer money that's coming back into the schools. And that's very significant these days. We see increases in test scores. I'll show you a quick chart to show you what that means. We also find that the improvements continue year after year while the schools remain on the program. As a byproduct of that, the students that are coming out of the school system will have better job-ready skills than they do today. Very quickly, this is one chart that is a side-by-side comparison of 8 elementary schools in a single city, the same school district, all having the same curriculum. The 3 schools that are on the left have our program, the 5 schools on the right do not. Significant increases. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that our program is the only thing that makes this happen. But what I would like to challenge is if our program can help them do things that they are not able to do without, then I think that's a very important thing. Impossible to read in this color scheme, but let me tell you quickly what this means. This chart is intended to show you starts and stops of schools on our program and what happens with their test scores. So you'll notice at the very beginning, the test scores of their baselines, and you see their dramatic shifts upward and to the right. The one at the very top is interesting. It's one school in Washington State that decided to use our program for 1 year. After their first year, their test scores went up, and then they decided, we don't need this anymore. Subsequent year, their test scores went down, which I think is very interesting. And this is consistent, this kind of data is consistent across 11 states in the country so far. Long-term implications. Not only good for now, good for long-term. Multiple studies coming out showing that students that receive social skills intervention end up having better mental health, better professional development, better educational development, and are making more money 10 and 15 years later. 2 studies here shown from University of Washington, another one by University of Illinois in Champaign. There's another study that's coming out of University of Washington pretty shortly where they're actually looking at longer term, a 30-year progression now of social skills intervention and the long-term impacts. The point I'm trying to make is whether you call it social emotional learning, character education, life skills, social skills, what we're really talking about is those missing R's that our kids aren't getting today beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic. And when you teach those things, everybody is going to benefit, just like when we use and learn and work with the 4-way test. We see better academic improvements. We see better improvements in school culture and safety. Huge, huge issue right now. We certainly see that the student confidence and social adeptness increases, not just overblown egos, which is what we see too often these days. We find that teachers love staying in the classroom because they're no longer getting burned out from discipline, and if we can keep more good teachers in the classroom, very positive thing. We employers will get better job-ready candidates, and hopefully, as a result, the community will thrive. So, that was a very quick walkthrough. And just to point out, I'm not going to read this slide, but the whole idea behind Rotary is we don't just listen for great information and then go off in our daily lives. The reason we do things like end polio worldwide is because we take action when we see there's a need. And so this is a little challenge basically that says it's much more important to much more important to do than just think. So ultimately, really, this is up to you at this point with this information. And that's officially the end of my presentation. And I have a couple minutes for questions. Anybody for any questions?
I want to mention your offer.
Oh, yes, thank you. That's what happens when I go fast. One of the things that we're doing, because this has been so near and dear to my heart, and because I believe in the concept of service above self, we are actually now, because too many schools say that they cannot afford our program, we are actually donating our program to up to 1,000 schools through the country. And what we're doing now is we're working with Rotaries who now support the schools and the communities to help with that community engagement. So we have several Rotaries all across the country already that have introduced this program into their schools. And if this is something that you might be interested in either individually or maybe as a district level, certainly happy to entertain that. Happy to answer those questions.
What is the name of your program? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Is there an acronym or something?
It's called SocialSmarts. SocialSmarts is actually the program. We all know about book smarts and street smarts. Well, we've got the SocialSmarts. Yes, sir.
I have a question on how you implement. Is it a case where you train teachers, or does it become something on the curriculum like how we have like religion or something, where it's a special class dedicated to it?
Well, it is specifically, okay, two answers. Yes, we train the teachers who then take it into the classroom. While there is a very distinct curriculum, and that normally I would have gone into a little more detail, but out of respect for your time, I blasted through that. It is a very, very specific, distinct curriculum that teaches things from everything from presentation skills, to respect, to kindness, and then walks through like 22 different virtues and shows kids exactly how they want to use it, implement it, etc. But because of the way we integrate it, we never say it's now social skills class and then you go off and go PE and do something else. It really becomes the way that the school does business at all times. Just like our own social skills, our own character, it is who we are and what we do, regardless of what else we're doing. And we build it in such a way that it is flexible enough that any school can implement it any way they want. Yes?
One quick other question. Is there a way where you can know if a school's participating, like they have like something on their website or just something so you know?
They're absolutely allowed to use, if they're a member, what we call a member school, because we believe in partnerships with our school. We don't throw a curriculum over, wish them well, and hope it all turns out. We're in constant communication with those schools. And now we're also having the schools in communication with each other to build a network of service providers. But the schools have the ability to put our logo, put our information on their websites, on their, if you will, marketing material, because a lot of schools, even public schools, have said that this program is some of the best marketing that they can do, because it speaks to the caliber of their school. So absolutely. Yes, sir.
Oh, sure. Well, I unfortunately agree with the indictment. But when I was in high school, not very long ago at all, it was a public high school, and I had a class. It was like personal development, and they talked about a lot of similar things. I think it was actually phased out in the 4 years I was there. But schools are, in some cases at least, doing something. I know that it varies a lot, case by case probably. But do you think there are any shortcomings overall with some of the approaches that schools have taken, like on a mass level?
The biggest approach is exactly what Mr. Ainsworth had just mentioned. Is it a separate, distinct curriculum? And as long as you keep it separate, for example, there are anti-bullying programs out there. Lots of them. Tons of them. But very often, and this is the key problem with it, is they treat it as though it's a separate, distinct subject matter from everything else. So you have your, say, character education, or you have your word of the month, or you have your anti-bullying program. And as one principal said, and I will quote her, she says, after we're done with the rah-rah, we just go back to life as normal. We don't change anything. And as anybody knows here, when you're changing behavior, positive or negative, you need time and you need continual practice. And honestly, social skills are just like learning anything else, whether it's math or reading. Math is a perfect example. When you're little, you learn numbers, right? After you've learned numbers, you start learning addition. Later on, when you're doing things like algebra, have you abandoned addition and subtraction? No, you're just refining it and you're continually learning it. So should our social skills be. So the biggest drawback is the idea that we treat it as a separate thing. We now have manners class, and then we go off and we do whatever else we do normally, and it doesn't stick. So when you integrate it into the fabric of how the school does business, that's where you see the changes.
And real quick, second question is, what are the biggest problems you notice? I mean, I'm sure it varies from the grade levels, but what are the biggest things that jump out at you all the time that kids are doing?
Well, there's the biggest and the most prevalent. Two different issues. Right now, quite frankly, bullying is the biggest problem. And the reason it is because the severity of it and the frequency of it is increasing to epidemic proportions. I mean, if you are a kid nowadays, ages 12 to 18, I'm sure some of you know them or have them. Your child has a 1 in 3 chance of being either a victim of bullying or the bully themselves. Now, just imagine any other condition. What if we had swine flu at a 1/3 contraction rate? We'd be freaking like crazy. But yet, we stand up with hands off and go, bullying, well, there's not much we can do. We have a bullying policy, we have a law. Well, that's great. We have a zero tolerance policy for bullying, but we have a zero tolerance policy against murder, too, in this country, don't we? It's not enough. The most prevalent problem is something literally as simple as disrespect and disruption of the classroom. And I did a study not too long ago, published a study in Washington State, that out of 6.75 on average hours that a student spends in school, they only get 3.5 hours of active learning time. Because, as one middle school teacher said, I'm spending so much time contending with things. Because kids don't understand that when they get in the classroom, their job is to sit down, hush up, and pay attention. And that has its impacts all along the continuum. Yes?
You mentioned that parents play a critical role in this. Unfortunately, within family settings, sometimes parents have institutionalized disrespect and things of that nature.
Yep.
What do you do to combat that? Because I know if I go to school and I learn that 2 + 2 = 4, I'm not going to go home and see my parents adding 2 + 2 = 5. But
Right.
you may tell me to treat people with respect, and then I go home and when family treats the neighbor with disrespect.
There are two answers to that, and it's a really good question. Did everybody hear that question? Basically, what do we do about the parents? There's two answers to that. First of all, we can't control the parents. I mean, parental involvement is the problem in a lot of different things in the classroom. We didn't really go into detail, but you can't force a parent to read to a child either. However, our belief has always been in this company that parents do want the best for their kids. They may not know what to do. They may not themselves have been taught. They may be confused. They may not have time, but generally speaking, they don't walk around trying to figure out how to mess up little Johnny or little Susie's life. So the answer number one is we have a parent's guide that goes with every single one of our programs, so that if a parent wants to know what's going on, we keep them in step with what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, why we're teaching it, and we give them practical examples to practice that at home. So they can, and very often, in some cases, we've heard that parents have gotten better jobs themselves because of what their kids have brought home. Particularly in low-income and minority families, that's huge. Poverty very often ends up being one of the reasons why parents can't focus on other things, because they're so busy trying to earn a living that being the discipline police is not on their radar. So we can help them in both ways. The second thing is, too, we explain to the kids why what we're teaching them is ultimately short-term and long-term in their best interest. But we also never stand in juxtaposition with the parent. So there have been kids, high school kids, for example, who will learn our lessons, understand what's going on, see how this is better for them, but they also understand that what mom and dad are teaching may not be the best way, but they see that this may be a better way. So it becomes kind of an insurance policy over what else is happening in their world, whether it's mom and dad or whether it's their communities and their neighborhoods. Because clearly there's a lot of rude, crude stuff going on in the neighborhoods. We need to give them that insurance policy. If we can convince that child what's in it for me, then that's how we make lifelong changes.
Thank you. I know that you have lots of energy and a lot of other things you could talk to us
Absolutely.
about. And I also understand that you brought your books
I
here.
did.
So you have books that you will be happy to autograph and sell to the group if anyone is interested. I think you said you were doing a discount for
Yes, ma'am.
Rotarians.
$10 today for
Okay,
Rotarians.
all right. And I want to say thank you so much for being here. Present you with our Crystal City Pentagon
Lovely.
coffee
And
cup.
may I present you with a copy of the book?
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Appreciate the invitation.
I'm going back to school next week or week after, so I'm sure I can take this with me and use this. So
Certainly.
thank you so much.